Youth, a reading force for promoting agricultural food system, a case of Nakuru County in Kenya. This is part of my research that I carried earlier, and it is integrated with other researches that I have carried out, particularly documentations and other areas. So it takes into context the issue of the actual research and other developments. So making youth a reading force for promoting agri-food system. So we are talking about 70% of our global food requirement coming from the smallholder farms around the world, as indicated by the study or the report of the Food and Agriculture Organization in 2014. But that's not the reality when it comes to the issue of what is happening on the ground. Although the majority of farmers are smallholder farmers, you find that farming is normally associated with poverty and also subsistence at that level of smallholder. And this is basically one of the reasons why many youth are not attracted to this agri-food system or farming. Though currently there are a number of youth who are getting engaged, we still need to do much more. Now we can see from this pictorial presentation, there are different areas of the agricultural value chain that we see the aspects of food, from the actual foods, from the production, from the transportation, and other. This is just an example of a dairy production value chain. Now, I've also given some kind of case studies from other documentation on youth and youth who are inspired to undertake certain aspects in the value chain on the agri-foods system. It can be in any of those, and these, for example, these are youth champions based in Uganda who are undertaking some kind of both production and processing. We have also some life lessons from same group of youths who talks about their engagement in crop production and how it has given them some motivation. All these are examples of youth who are dealing with crops and other aspects of production in the agri-food system, giving their experience and exposure. Now, well, it is recognized that youth have their own other focus. I am stating in this research that youth can also be very critical to engaging in the agricultural value system, because they can be able to bring in agricultural technology and innovation into farming as part of one of their involvement. Particularly, we know that most of the youths are technology gurus, and they can therefore be able to get technology into farming. So that being an opportunity. They are also involved in management activities, and they are knowledgeable, in other words. So they have issues of keeping accounts, communication skills, and all others. And currently, you will see that they are developing ICT applications or offering ICT services that are useful to farming. They have developed apps that are relevant to this sector. And also, the issue of agripreneurs. We see most of them now being involved in different levels of agripreneurship, despite the fact that they may not own the resources at the production level. And people have earlier talked about issues of climate-smart agriculture, particularly in the issues of smallholder farmers. So we can say that the youth have the energy, the enthusiasm, the skills, the knowledge, and the ambition to create a thriving, sustainable economy. In the issue of introduction, as we realize from this year and beyond, there is an increased focus on food system. With the realization of what happened with the COVID, then many people are talking about food system, food security, and beyond this year, what will happen? So there is that desire by the international community to create what we call sustainable food system. And this will definitely increase in the near future. And this is where we now say there is an avenue for the youth future engagement in enhancing this food system. Now, this is an indicative of the agricultural production value chain approach, where the youth could enter into any of these areas or levels, right from the input service, from the farming, from the processors, from the distributors, the retailers, and consumer. So this gives us some kind of perspective that youth should not be limited to the production level. There are many entry points where the youth can be able to handle the food production or food agri-food systems. The value chain structure and the youth engagement. In this case, we are talking about starting from the inputs, the production, the transformation, the trading, and right up to the consumer level. As indicated below by the pictorial representation, there are several levels that the youth could be engaged in as the actors. So we can see they could be actors in the input supply level, the producer levels, the processors, the traders, up to the consumer level. Now, the reality back here in Africa, we can see that in sub-Saharan Africa, we have about 600 million people who are currently under the age bracket of 35, what we talk about as the young people. And a majority of these do not have access to reliable livelihoods. And that is why they engage in informal sectors, where they would gain their livelihoods. And there is also the issue of the economic and social cost of this challenge, that the youth will require some economic opportunities, particularly in the issues of employment. They will also can be engaged or require issues of market assessments, where there are opportunities. And therefore, we can say agriculture remains an important source of employment and economic activity of the Kenyan rural youth. This is also coming from my study, which I took in 3 sub-counties in Nakuru, that is Joro, Kuresoi, and Subukia sub-counties. In Kenya, we are saying that over half of the total population is youth, and majorly, most of them are rural. A majority of these living in the rural areas are unemployed. And this unemployment has become a perennial problem in Kenya. And this is a fact that most of the youths are not entering into formal job market. Majority of them are going through self-reliance projects, and this is particularly in the areas of agri-enterprise, particularly with the rural youth. And I looked at the conceptual framework in the study and was considering the issue of participation of the youth in the food system, their livelihoods, and then looking at their backgrounds in the study. And from the results that I got, the age of the rural youths by the age category, most of those who are between 26 and 30, which was about 70%, were basically majority of the rural youths who had either completed school or were doing some informal aspect. So the number of rural youth below 18 years was slightly lower from the study as compared to those who were already in the bracket of 18 years to 35 years. That is particularly in the rural areas where my study was. Now, what was the effect of these agri-food projects on the youth's economic welfare? From the study, 94% of the youth from the study were involved in some income-generating activities. This is in relationship to the rural areas, and most of them were farming activities. And as we shall see later, this is the reason why I'm saying that youth will become a leading force for promoting agri-food system, because already, particularly in the rural areas, they are involved. It's only a few aspects that will be required to be enhanced. When you look at the kind of self-reliance projects that they implemented, you also realize that most of them were basically farming or agri systems or enterprise. This was about 69% of those surveyed. So a majority of these respondents were involved in crop farming and livestock farming. Others were also involved in beekeeping, and only a small percentage was involved in other projects. So the source of income, economic-wise, it was also, number one was farming activities, as related to others like casual labor, crafts and tailoring, or running small businesses. Now, this is some pictorial aspects of where the youths that I conducted some survey in Subukia are engaged in. In that pictorial aspect, we are trying to study how they were dealing with papai as a fruit. Now, these are also some of the farms that youths have been engaged in on cribbing beans in some parts of Uganda, which are also documented some few cases. And these are some farming systems also that the youths are engaged in terms of carrot growing. So what I'm trying to bring into this aspect of youth and agri-food system is to say that there is wide and broad avenue for the youth. So in my conclusions, what I cite is that many rural youths have the opportunity to promote agri-food systems. They also have an avenue of strengthening, or if we could strengthen some of the policy on agri-food system, then youth would be able to earn their livelihoods from that system, or from those systems. I also say there is need to encourage adequate processes for transition of agri-food system management from elders to the youth. Just as somebody else cited earlier and other presenters have mentioned, agricultural production has basically been undertaken by elderly people. But this could change from the perspective of the management system towards youth promoting agriculture to be what it should be and to be able to enhance the food system. Also promoting role models and success story of the youths in agri-foods, just as I cited in some of those pictorial presentations, some youths in Uganda and even parts of Kenya. There are many youths through agripreneurship capacity building who have been able to engage themselves into agricultural production. These are some of the references from where I got some of the information, and basically that is what I had for this paper. And as I conclude, it's just to say that this is part of a small proportion of what I did for my research. From my research, I have already documented about 5 papers in international journals. And from that, with the leadership, currently on the Google and also ResearchGate, there is about a leadership of about 3,000 people. So I say that this area of the youth still require some more insights and more focus to be able to ensure that we make them a leading force for promoting agri-foods. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you. I think that was a very timely presentation, and particularly in relation to youth and entrepreneurs. I want to appreciate that he has done justice to that area. I want to recognize Baraka College team led by William Kerr. Please, where are you? Welcome, feel welcome, and we are moving on. Just started the afternoon session. So can we open it up? Let's open up for questions, please. Dr. has done justice to time, and so I'll allow 3 questions. So I start with that. Can I see the hands first, so that the first one, the second, here, the last one. Good. Thanks. If there is a burning one this side, please, I'll still give you an opportunity.
Okay, thank you for the good presentation. And I have a zeal I have interest, especially in areas to do with youth entrepreneurship, and that is my big thing that I usually do. But I have a comment and also a question. So my comment is, for us to make this youth to engage in agribusiness or in entrepreneurship, we need to make agriculture attractive, or we coin the term sexy. So, so how can you make, these are young people, so how can you make agriculture sexy or attractive for them to engage in it? And I hope you are going to respond to that. And then a question also. In the notes, you presented the value chain, the different activities. In your own opinion, which segment do you think is favorable for the youth? Because we youth, we are people who are ambitious, and we want to get money as fast as possible. So among these different points in the value chain, which one is the most appropriate for young people who can engage in? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. for that query and also suggestion. In case of making agriculture attractive to the youth, I think we need to start at higher institutions of learning and also middle-level institutions, because these are the people who have the information. And the only way to do it is not only for the academic process, but ensuring that we can give them more than that, building their capacity through enterprise management, value addition, and all that. Because I should think, just tying it with your second question, that we should first introduce them to the best level of the value chain, agri-food value chain system. And I think it is not in the area of production. It is in the area of input supply, processors, and traders. Those 3 levels, they have a more attractiveness, a better attractiveness to the youth than probably in the production level. Also realizing that we have said they do not have the resource for the production, resource base, particularly in the area of the RAD, the finances and all that. So, but in case of the other levels of the value chain, we could start there, and that is the beginning point to make agricultural, agri-food system attractive, and particularly in those areas of the value chain. If we made those ones attractive to them, I am sure even in future, in the production, although currently we see some youth engaging already in the production. I can quote a case of a student who went to National Polytechnic in Nairobi and only had a degree, I think, in, a diploma in other areas of, I think it was either catering or something. And she ended up renting land in Kajiado. Today, she is a multi-millionaire because she has been able to sell seedlings, potted seedlings. She was quoting the other day when she was interviewed that a day she can be able to market seedlings worth 200,000 a day. And she is doing this by transporting them to various destinations. So you can see there is attractiveness when our youth can see what I was citing here in my presentation as role models or models, okay? Because those are the ones who can be able to make the others get attracted to production and to make agriculture more attractive to the youth. So if that's the reason as why I was also bringing in those case studies in pictorial form, where they are quoting what they have done, particularly in Uganda, and in different areas, and in different production enterprises. So I hope I have endeavored to respond to your query.
Thank you. We move to the next one.
Thank you very much, Dr. for your presentation. I have just two issues. I think one is just a cheeky one, and the other one, maybe you can respond. Within your value chain structure, I was just wondering where you would fit transportation, because we know that much of the agricultural outputs are transported, particularly a case in point would be milk. So I thought that that needs to be fit somewhere. That's a cheeky one. However, the main question is, we know that within the value chain there are a number of functions that can be performed in urban areas. But when you look at the trend now, there's a huge movement of the youth from rural areas to urban areas. So if you were to look at the function of production, how would we...
has demotivated the youth. Okay? Not like if you take, for example, Nakuru County, where Paredram was attracting many people into production, it is now a demotivator. So we need to go back and say what can attract the youth through even the aged producers. So that is one dimension that we need to. As the issue of transport, I think it cuts across all those value chain levels. If you look at the inputs, there is an issue of transport. If you look at production, there is the issue of transport. If you look at the areas of transformation in terms of extension, service, and outreach, transport is required. So I would say transport should not be seen as just an aspect that should be taken at one point, but it's a cross-cutting issue around the value chain.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks a lot for your stimulating talk, Dr. King'ao. Mine is just curiosity. We've been talking about youth and agriculture for now almost 2 or 3 decades. I know Kenya is an agricultural-based country. That's what we say, the economy of Kenya. So one would wonder where these youth go to. Where do they end up if they are not in the sector of agriculture, if it is an agricultural-based economy? Even during my time, I used to be told we are shying away from, we want white-collar jobs. Okay? I think we need to work with hard figures, which can be used either on comparative basis or something. Do we have any benchmark data that you might refer to so that you tell us what percentage of the youth that we output every day in the universities, colleges, and so on would be the right figure that we would expect to have in this sector so that we say we are really making an impact? Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. I think there is quite some data that is basically coming out from the Food and Agricultural Organization on the involvement of youth in the value chain. I don't have a concrete data here, but from the study of 2017 FAO, it is indicated to be something between the range of 18 to about 35. Engaged, currently getting engaged across the African continent into different aspects of agriculture. But it's cited that it's still low comparatively, linking it to the population that we have cited of about 600 million, aged between 18 and 35. So there is still quite a long way to go, but I think the potential is there, and that is why we are saying it is making the youth a force for promoting agricultural production. And in case of academic, if I may come in there, I think there is still quite a lot that needs to be done to improve our curriculums, not only for the core courses in agriculture, but also capacity building short-term courses, particularly in the area of agripreneurship, that will motivate our youth. As we are saying that they have the energy, they have the knowledge, and they have the capacity to undertake this agri-food system. But we are not doing much to integrate them. For example, there are many of our graduates who would graduate from our universities, but they do not have what we can say, the soft and skills to enable them even relate with agricultural production. So we need to do much. Apart from the subjects area, we need to do short-term courses that will entice them when they leave or they graduate from our institution to be able to get involved in agricultural production.
Thank you, Daktari. Let's give him a very heavy clap for him. Thank you very much. And if you have more questions, you can send the chat. I think we can still engage Daktari. He's around with us. So I would like to invite the next presenter, Dr. Samuel Onyuma, and we have online after Dr. Onyuma, Dennis Kialo, who will be presenting virtually at 3:35. So I'm hoping Dr. Onyuma will do 25 minutes. That will allow us to catch up with the next presenter. That means we'll allow him more the time, and maybe immediately after Kialo presents, you can ask more questions for him. After all, it's with us. Yeah. So, Dr. Onyuma on financing value chains, and issues of capital markets. Welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this presentation. I wish to shift the discussion a little bit. We've had a lot of hardcore sciences, so allow me to move on also to another area. My presentation is on the financing of the value chains for agri-SMEs in Kenya using capital markets. From the discussion since the first day, the issue of financing of the transformation of the value chain has emerged in almost every keynote speaking. And yesterday, the panel discussants mentioned that in all the issues that pertain to the transformation of agricultural value chains needs financing. So I want to mention an aspect of the agribusiness value chain, why we need an alternative mode of financing those SMEs in agriculture, and then I will look at the status of the listing of the agri-SMEs in the Kenyan securities markets, and I'll also reflect on how our agri-SMEs expect to benefit from raising capital from the capital markets, and I'll also mention something to do with why are agri-SMEs shying away from raising capital from the capital markets. And then I'll give my thoughts on how can we rejig this discussion so that the capital markets be more attractive for SMEs in agriculture to raise capital. Now, in all the discussions, it has emerged that agriculture is a key driver of economic growth. And the farms which operate in the agricultural sector also contribute to economic growth. So supporting the stability and the growth of such SMEs can foster economic prosperity by way also of creating jobs to the youths, like we have been told here, particularly in those economies where there are higher levels of poverty. Agri-SMEs growth also address key economic issues that affect our usual daily life, and also the issue of production, consumption, livelihoods, as well as supply chain stability. We've been told here, and I want to iterate, that about 70% of African population live in rural areas, and they depend on agriculture for their incomes. So economic growth in agricultural sector has been found to be twice as effective in reducing poverty compared to growth in other sectors. So strengthening agricultural value chains could be among the most effective approaches of addressing poverty in African countries or in developing countries. Now, if you look at the statistics from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, in 2019, Kenya expected to grow at its economy at 5.3%, and agri-SMEs were expected to contribute about 25% of that growth. And reports also indicate that agri-SMEs constitute 78% of all businesses that are in the country, and they create 40% of jobs annually. So you see that those farms, businesses which are in the agricultural sector, they act as key drivers that drives our economy. So for Kenya's agri-SMEs to continue driving economic growth, create dynamic market-oriented growth, and spur innovations and job creation,
they need access to growth finance. And in addition to the finance that they need, they also need the information, technology, and trading infrastructure, which we have been told here for the last 3 days. So access to finance has been found to be the main barrier to the growth of growth and competitiveness of agri-SMEs. But the farms which operate in the agricultural sector, they have a lot of limitation when it comes to financing. Because as you are aware, banks would usually want to work with well-established farms because they have a track record and they have evidence of profitability. Records are kept well, management systems are in place. But when you look at SMEs, including those which deal in agriculture, that is usually lacking. And again, banks are scared of financing agri-SMEs because of the perceived risk. Whether that risk is genuine or not, that's another discussion. So you find that you look at banks, microfinance institutions, and other private sector financiers, they shy away from financing those businesses which are in the agricultural sector. And I'm saying that this is where now capital markets should come in. Because if other financiers are not willing to finance agriculture or other farms which operate in the agriculture, then that financing gap can be addressed by these SMEs, accessing capital from the capital markets. Now, then why do we need to have an alternative mode of financing agri-SMEs? Remember that for the agricultural value chains to be developed, we need serious financing. Financing at levels that might not be provided by microfinance institutions. Financing that cannot be provided by the owners of these businesses. So I'm arguing here that despite having quality agricultural products with the established market, most of these SMEs, they lack financing to finance, purchase of inputs, raw materials, infrastructures, as well as other value-adding infrastructures. So we know that governments in developing countries, Africa, including Kenya, they have some programs, funding programs, which are targeted to some rural-based organizations. But I'm arguing here that this funding usually may not be tailor-made for agribusiness or agri-SMEs, which operate in the rural areas. And therefore, their need for finances is not met. If you look at the institutions which generally finance businesses in rural areas, we have microfinance institutions. We have those social impact private sector financiers. These type of finances are not modulated well to be able to address the uniqueness of agri-SMEs which operate in those areas. Consequently, institutions like microfinance, they don't address the need for the financing needs of agri-SMEs. Banks also have the same limitation like microfinance because they view agri-SMEs to lack serious collated assets. They lack financial records, audited financial accounts, and therefore they can't also get guarantee from other financial institutions other than those banks. So even this impact investing institutions, they provide some line of credit opportunities to address other issues which might not be so unique to agribusinesses. So given the rapid transformation in agricultural sector, I'm just arguing that there are many operational constraints that these institutions or these businesses do face in production, processing, marketing, which is leading to income inequalities. So private sector is unable to provide the needed funds. That is the whole thesis here. So promoting access to capital markets finance can act as a means of enhancing the government enabling environment to help these businesses in the country to create lasting economic opportunities in the communities where they operate. So what is the status of the raising of capital by generally SMEs in the capital markets? I want to say that in this country, our capital market is made up of the equities market, that is the market for shares, and the bonds market. And allow me to call that the securities exchange. So in our country here, we have one securities exchange. That is the Nairobi Securities Exchange, which was created in 1954. At the time of that creation, we had only one listed firm among the first six that were created then, which was in the agricultural sector. Later, we have had some other farms dealing in the agricultural sector, which have 60 listing. Others have, fell by the way, got delisted, and 6 are still remaining. What I want to mention here is that even at the time that the market was being created, already there were farms in the agricultural sector which had recognized the fact that they could use and raise capital from the capital markets. The lack of formal financing for agri-SMEs is where now this use of capital markets comes in. It is against this background that the capital markets regulator, the capital markets authority, and the market itself, the Nairobi Securities Exchange, created a special counter for listing SMEs called the Growth Enterprise Market Segment. So I'll be referring to it as the platform or the segment. That was in 2013. Since that time, only 6 SMEs have raised capital from the capital markets. When this market segment was created, it was expected that there will be a lot of SMEs which will be trooping to the market to raise finance, to finance their value chains. However, it seems like SMEs are shying away from raising capital from the capital market. And I will be mentioning why that is happening. So GEMS is a securities market segment, like I've mentioned, set up for growth SMEs that do not fulfill the usual market listing requirements, okay? And through listing on the GEMS, I'm arguing that agri-SMEs can be able to raise substantial amount of capital and to start a business or to grow the business by using such finances to develop their value chains. And they can also benefit from the increased profile, image, and market trading liquidity within that relaxed regulatory environment. What we need to appreciate here is that by creating that special segment, the issue was that the segment is meant for those firms that cannot satisfy the usual rigorous listing requirements. So, such listing on GEMS can also augment the various initiatives undertaken by both the government and private sector to deal with the challenges that face agri-SMEs. However, none of the agri-SMEs has gained listing in the market and thereby raised capital. Despite the fact that a number of nominated financial advisors who are meant to help them with the financial advisory, regulatory advisory, legal advisory on how to raise capital in the market. So this is something that is really striking. We have 18 of such nominated advisors. Allow me to call them nomads. So we would have expected many SMEs, including agri-based SMEs, to be able to utilize the expertise of these financial transaction advisors to advise them on how they can raise capital from the capital market. The slow listing on the GEMs at the capital market is an issue that is of concern, especially if agri-based SMEs are to be attracted to raise growth capital from the market. Now, how can agri-SMEs benefit by raising capital from the capital markets? I'm mentioning here that such listing can enable such SMEs to raise more capital for expansion by issuing their shares to investors. It can also generate agri-SMEs awareness, making their products or services to be known to a new group of potential investors, including customers. I'm also mentioning here that it can also lead to increase in their market shares and liquidity by allowing even more of them to develop appetite for capital market financing. If you see your colleague going to the market and raising finance, you are likely also to be motivated to follow suit. And I'm also mentioning here that listing of agri-SMEs will also enable agripreneurs to share risk with new shareholders while benefiting from the possible increase in the farm valuation. What I mean here is that instead of an agri-SMEs chewing all the risks which are associated with the nature of their business, they can, by selling their shares to the public and raising capital, they will be sharing those risks with the investment public. And as part of achieving the requisite management standards and transparency goals, agri-SMEs listing can also enhance their corporate reputation by highlighting their priorities, organizational structures, financial power, thus promoting value chain transformation. What we are saying is that the SMEs have weak governance systems. They are also not capable of maintaining rigorous documentations, which are required by lenders. But by listing, we are saying that they are likely to improve their corporate governance practices because that's a requirement for you to remain listing. The resultant improvement, exposure, and credibility has a significant effect on agribusiness or agri-SMEs networking with stakeholders, which can be used to obtain trade credit and also extend business opportunities with established clients and new business. What we are saying is that the moment you gain listing, you will belong to a group. You will start dining on the table of men, I'm quoting that. Because now you are a special category of SMEs, not the ones which are still having challenges with their management systems. So investors will have confidence when investing in agri-SMEs under the growth enterprise market segment because they know they are protected by regulations, and while the listed agri-SMEs will also be assured of long-term financing through equity and bonds. Let me mention something here that by moving and raising capital from the capital markets, these agri-SMEs will also improve their profiles, and because of the requirements for listing, although relaxed for them, they will still be required to have some basic, to satisfy some basic regulations insofar as management is concerned, and bookkeeping and auditing of accounts is concerned. These are some of the issues which lenders do look for, and therefore such SMEs will be able to also access the debt market. Now, in an effort to encourage the SMEs generally to list in capital markets, the Capital Markets Authority, in conjunction with the Nairobi Securities Exchange, created an incubation, like a small business incubation, to accelerate, to help accelerate the process of listing. Now, this project has been dubbed Ibuka, and this is a non-trading incubation and acceleration program. This program is aimed at assisting the potential SMEs which are intending to seek listing and raise capital from the capital markets. And the program has an array of service providers, ranging from law firms, business management consultants, human resource consultants, those financial advisory firms, and the intention is to work with the SMEs in a step-by-step, one-on-one with the SMEs, so that they can be able to be in the mode for listing. The expectation is that once they graduate from this incubation program, they can then graduate and move on to the market now and be able to access funding by listing on the growth enterprise market segment. So, as at end of last month, mentioning that, they don't want to really formalize. Some of them are like, if I can, still do it, why bother with so many requirements? And there's also the legacies of family-owned businesses with tight ownership control. SMEs, including the ones in the agricultural sector, they are like, when I get listed and I sell shares to the public, I will be giving away some of the ownership control that I have. There's also the lack of enough licensed nomads to provide necessary advisory services. We are talking of 18 nomads already licensed. And we are talking about a population of hundreds of thousands of, for example, SMEs, including those who are in agriculture.
2 minutes. I'm told someone is waiting.
Oh boy. Okay. So those are some of the reasons why maybe they are not moving to the market. So, my thoughts: how can we make agri-SMEs to be attracted to raise capital from the capital markets? I am saying that currently there is a 20% ownership threshold that an SME must have for it to be able to raise capital from the capital markets. We are just wondering whether this threshold can be reduced maybe to 10%. There's the issue of the reluctance, which is caused by fear of dilution of ownership and loss of ownership control. My view is that we can change the Companies Act and the Market Regulations Act so that we can do what we call a direct issuing of shares, so that we bypass the transaction advisors, because it is these transaction advisors who usually charge very high fees, which SMEs cannot be able to pay. In other words, also, we can also, stagger the, structures of ownership, so that we have two classes of ownership: the one which has a greater, voting power, and another one which has low voting power. If you look at, for example, Facebook, Zuckerberg and his few group, they are only owning 18% of the company, but they have the largest voting power when it comes to decisions. There is also the need for a partnership of like-minded professionals who can team up and do an application to offer services as nomads. This way, then, it will be so cheaper for SMEs to be able to, pay for their services, as opposed to if lawyers are in the house, human resource consultants in the house, other transaction advisors are in the house. It will be very expensive. And I'm saying that more elaborate strategies are needed here, including proper valuation, because one of the problems that the exchange is facing with working with SMEs is how to value their businesses. So cost of leasing has been very high, and this can be reduced if we go the alternative route of direct listing. The market and the regulator should also undertake comprehensive awareness campaign to sensitize agri-based SMEs on the importance of raising capital through the market. And lastly, there is a growing market for private equity funds. These are businesses which buy ownership in other businesses. Once those young businesses have grown, then they exit by selling those shares that they had. So we are saying that an effort can be put across to these private equity funds to consider exiting the businesses that they had invested into through the capital markets. For purposes of time, allow me to stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Let's give him a... And we will allow another presenter, and once that presenter finishes, Dr. Nyuma will request you stay around. So keep those questions. We'll give you opportunity, and that will even be better. You are digesting what he was talking about. It's more having SMEs being part of the capital market. That's a very new way of looking at things. Okay. Can I get the next presenter? I have Dennis Kialo talking on food sovereignty, and he's from JENA, Justice and Ecology Network Africa. Welcome, Dennis. If you are hearing us, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you.
And we can see your presentation. Please proceed.
Thanks a lot. Really appreciate. So I'm Dennis Chalo, and representing JENA, that is the Jesuits Justice and Ecology Network of Africa. It's a network under the Catholic Church, and presenting this work that is done by Father Charles Chilufya and myself. And speaking to the theme of the conference for this particular session, that is responding to climate change for sustainable food value chains, our presentation will be on food sovereignty in times of recovery, building back better through mainstreaming social justice and leveraging agroecology in Africa. So looking at this, we are going to understand what is JENA's perspective and why we are looking at this, and also get to understand what is the level of food sovereignty in Africa. Then also get to know what is driving food sovereignty, what is being done, and what can we do beyond what is already being done. So that said, I'll give you some small background about the issue. So I know most people are more conversant with food security, but as JENA, we are more concerned about food sovereignty. While they might sound similar, food sovereignty goes beyond even providing the food, ensuring that there's access to the food, but we also want to ensure that there is social inclusion of the people, such that people who are even at the bottom of the pyramid are directly involved even in production, even in distribution, and lastly, even the quality of food they consume. That means, while it may be okay to import food, to bring food from multinationals, it is not okay when the people at the grassroots are not involved in the production processes, so that they are also able to earn a livelihood. So that is why, from us, we look at it from food sovereignty perspective. So that said, then looking now at food sovereignty parameters within Africa, one thing we noticed that it is an important goal, even within the SDGs framework, the Agenda 2063 for Africa, and also aligned to the climate change Paris Agreement of 2015. Because when we talk food security or food sovereignty, then when climate changes, it means that even the production systems are affected. So that is why there has to be that connection with the global goals and also the global goals around climate change. And that, just like I had mentioned, that food sovereignty is, of course, from that perspective. And that means that GENA, we are championing for agroecological and indigenous approaches that ensure that we sustain our food sovereignty and also ensure we have sufficient food for people within Africa. And when we say agroecological and indigenous approaches, we mean that we are not like opposing what the technologies that are there to improve production, but we are trying to champion for technologies and innovations that ensure that we are not destroying the very environment at the expense of trying to increase food now and have less for future generations. These are some few pictorials on food sovereignty in Africa. One of the pictures is taken from Madagascar. It's a rice field. You can see it's flooded. The other picture is taken from northern part of Kenya. You can see camel pastoralism, but it's quite dry. And the other picture is taken from a place where the climate is quite good, mixed agriculture, small scale in nature. And then we also have another picture around blue economy. So this, in a nutshell, gives us a picture of when we speak food, how is this food coming to the plate? It's coming from such kind of production systems. So speaking into some numbers, I know most of the people in this particular conference are actually scientists, researchers, lecturers, among others. And I know numbers speak a lot. And according to an FAO report done by, among others, FAO, IFAD, and others, is that we have 690 million people who are hungry, as at last year. And majority of those who are hungry are actually from Africa, and that is 36%. And there is an estimate that by the year 2030, these 36% who are at 250 million right now, they are likely to increase to 841 million, which will mean that half of the population, which will be hungry in the next 10 years or so, will be from Africa. Then that gives an alarm to us. Then another thing is also a report published last year. It's called the Global Hunger Index by Sovereignty. And ranking lowest are actually countries from Africa. Like Kenya, where we are, is ranked number 84 out of 107. And when we talk about Global Hunger Index, it uses parameters that are measuring whether children under the age of 5 are able to access quality and nutritious food. They are not suffering from malnutrition or probably even death because of lack of food. And you see Kenya is not doing quite well. And even worse, we have the likes of Madagascar at number 105 out of 107. This means that these countries have serious and alarming levels of hunger, and that is facing children. And when that is the case, it means if a parent can have a kid and they are not able to provide food to them, what is the situation even with the parents? It's probably even worse than that. Then we also have reports, and key among them is reports published by the African Economic Research Consortium for a number of countries. They show that there has been some increased poverty levels, especially now that we have COVID-19. And these are, of course, increased inequalities to access to food, especially among the poor. And another parameter to even reflect our food sovereignty status is actually the fact that we mostly depend on agriculture and fisheries. And I know this is not a new concept to the people in this field. This means that if there is a shock within agriculture and fisheries sectors, then most people will go hungry. And most of the shocks we are talking about here, we are talking of the likes of floods, drought, the likes of COVID-19. If they disrupt the agriculture and fisheries systems, whereby 70 to 80% of the people are earning their livelihood from, then it means that our food sovereignty status is wanting. Then lastly, it's also because, of course, I know most people already know that most of African economies are agro-based. And for example, Kenya, 34% of our GDP, according to KNBS, is from agriculture. That means any shock in this sector is definitely going to affect so many people, and not just the people, but also our economy as a whole. So here is some pictorial, which is basically a map, two maps. And what we see here is countries' GDP, agriculture and forestry and fishing contribution to GDP. And the other map is the Global Hunger Index. And just to pick a few countries, let's say Chad, for example. Chad has a dark brown color, which means that they highly depend on agriculture. But look at the color for Global Hunger Index. It's this color showing that they are at alarming levels of food, of hunger. So that means countries that are heavily reliant on agriculture, surprisingly, are the same countries that are worrying levels of global hunger. Look at Madagascar, a dark color in terms of GDP. Then the color here, which is orange in color, means that they are at alarming levels. And I know there's supposed to be a bar at the bottom showing what these colors mean. But look at a country like Algeria. They are not very dependent on agriculture, but their food, their global hunger levels is relatively low. The same applies to South Africa. That means when a country is heavily reliant on agriculture, well, especially in Africa, then they are the ones who are likely to face hunger. So that is a question and food for thought for the many people in this particular conference. So having got to understand that, then what is really making us suffer from hunger, or actually food insovereignty? And I've alluded to some of these things, and the key among them is, of course, climate change, which we get to appreciate, and also other ecological disasters. Last year, we had the locust invasion, especially within the Horn of Africa, Kenya included. We have been having fall armyworms, and these are key things that statistics show that have reduced our food availability. Another element is also within climate change is also the fish stock, whereby there are a number of fish that are available now, especially due to increased salinity, because that is from pollution and also the changing temperatures. They have sort of affected the available fish stock within our oceans and water bodies. Then maybe second from last is also post-harvest losses. An FAO report last year showed that 14% of the food we produce is actually going to waste due to post-harvest losses in between when it's produced and when it reaches the consumer. That is at farm gate to consumer level. So with that said, and that is just Africa, that means a lot of food is lost, yet a number of people are going home hungry. And then lastly, of course, COVID-19 has disrupted even the systems of how we distribute food, moving it from surplus areas to deficit areas, especially in countries whereby they are still facing lockdowns and restrictions on movement. And I know Kenya last year, we had such kind of scenarios. And you find some areas have excess of food, others have deficit. And lastly is also uptake of innovation. We have some good innovation, which are not necessarily going to affect climate in a negative way, but farmers, especially due to resource constraints, are not able to take up some of those innovations. And just adding to why we are food insovereign as Africa is something that is well known to most of us probably in this conversation, is we have very good policies on paper, but do we really implement them? Well, a case example is, for example, the Cardiff Malabo Declaration, which says we should allocate 10% of our budget to agriculture. But does that happen? Well, no. Most of our counties, especially in Kenya, if I quote them, they spend around 4 to 5% of their budgets on agriculture. Yet most of these counties are actually agro-based. That means we are also not working to implement the very global policies that we are signatories to. Then the other thing is around corruption and governance. And a corruption perception index report last year singles out Malawi and Zambia, but not to mean that they are the only countries facing these issues. Kenya and others are still facing the issues. That means our resources are actually being misused. Another element is over-reliance on food aid, loans, and imports. Well, I know people have different perceptions around loan or imports and also food aid. While we appreciate the support we get from development partners, we have created another problem of we are always depending on them. If it is loans, we are always relying to have loans to even meet our budget deficits. And a case example is we have enough fish in Africa, but 74% of the fish we consume from our plate is actually important, and most of it actually comes from China. While you might imagine you are consuming fish from Kisumu or Mombasa, you are actually consuming fish from China. And that is not just from Kenya, actually the entire of Africa. And then a report also shows that, that is by FAO, that by 2025, we are likely to triple the food imports to Africa, a continent whereby the climates are good and the like. But well, we have the Africa Free Continental Trade Area that we hope that will help us leverage on our internal trade and not export from outside Africa. Then lastly is we have disaster preparedness policies. We are even signatories to the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction for 2015 to 2030. But when disasters happen, they look like it's a surprise, and we rarely respond accordingly. Even last year, we had warning from FAO that locusts would invade Kenya and other countries in the Horn of Africa. But we just sat and relaxed and started running up and down when the disaster had struck. So that means that is also a driver of food insecurity in Africa. And lastly is also our social protection mechanisms. While we have them, it is good to appreciate that we are not able to cushion the vulnerable as it's supposed to be. I know some countries are doing quite well, the likes of South Africa and Namibia, and cushioning the poor and those who are needy in terms of food. But a number of countries in Africa do not have such mechanisms. So they mostly have to rely on donors and the like to meet such deficits in terms of food. So those few things that I've mentioned are some of the issues that are affecting food sovereignty in Africa. And they have been quoted and researched over and over again. And probably it's just a matter of now like putting perspectives to it. And one thing we also have to appreciate is while we have all these problems, at least there are some efforts. We can't say nothing is being done. And broadly, I might not pinpoint all of them. And speaking from an Africa perspective, we see a lot of cash transfers and food relief, especially when disasters strike, from organizations like World Bank, FAO. And here we quote just a few examples of some of the countries that have benefited from that in the year 2020. The likes of Ethiopia, Sudan, Action Aid in Somali, and the like. Then we also have been having interventions to ensure that smallholder farmers and pastoralists increase their production systems or improve their production systems. And if I might quote one, is the World Bank support to innovative agri-tech startups. Actually, that one was for Kenya. And that is just to help the farmers improve production. And I think Kenya, we are a bit advanced in terms of agri-techs. And then lastly, maybe to quote an African Union drought insurance policy for Madagascar, which is like has helped the country despite the situation, which is quite serious at the moment. They are doing better than before. Then we also have other interventions around building climate and disaster resilience policies. And for example, we have the emergency locust response program, early warning systems, and we also have local social protection programs, which we said they are not enough, but at least we have some interventions in place. Other interventions in place also within, for example, our network, the Jesuits Justice and Ecology Network of Africa. And while we work in a number of countries like Zambia, Congo, Kenya, Zimbabwe, we have been able to have interventions. While they have not been able to reach everybody, at least there are interventions to improve production and also improve access to water and land rights, which are also important in producing sufficient food. So what do we learn from all these statistics, numbers, and also existing research? We learned that Africa is still struggling to attain food sovereignty, and that even before COVID-19 pandemic, the issue was still wanting, and that COVID-19 has just aggravated the situation which was wanting at the moment. Another thing that we learn or conclude is that most of these interventions that we saw, cash transfers, food aid, micro interventions to support farmers and pastoralists, most of them are short-term. And development partners or those who intervene tend to act maybe for a year or two, but do not give resilience, especially to the farmers and also the vulnerable. So that is another thing we get to appreciate. Then another thing we appreciate is that Early warning systems can actually avert disasters, especially on food sovereignty. But we also appreciate that we are not using them as we should use them. We get to know the information, but we don't act accordingly. Then another thing we appreciate from all this is that technology and innovation can actually complement food security initiatives, especially in COVID-19 era. And we see those interventions like the World Bank, what Jenna is doing, they are actually geared towards ensuring that the producers are able to produce enough food. Then second to last is capacity building to the vulnerable is important because you can't give people fish all the time. You need to teach them how to fish. And that is a song that has been sung over and over again, but it's also time to make it like more widespread. Then lastly is there is need for African countries to be insured against the threats of food sovereignty. And I quoted the example of Madagascar, which has taken some African Union insurance policy for their farmers. Kenya also attempted the same with an insurance program targeting the livestock farmers in the northern part of Kenya. While it has taken place, it is not as widespread and as impactful as it should be. So this is something that we get to also appreciate. So what do we take home, or what do we do now that we know all these problems, we know what is being done, and we also know what the gaps are? We get to appreciate that taking it from here and not just speaking in conferences, we need to intervene more. And how do we intervene? It's to ensure first we have capacity building, especially for producer traders. Producer traders, simply put, they are just farmers because they produce, they consume, and they also sell. And one thing we should address is post-harvest losses and also helping them link with markets. And I remember I quoted a 14% loss of food we produce in Africa between the farm gate and the consumer. This is actually food wasted that we could avoid if we are able to give them the skills and also support them, not just with skills, but also take up particular efforts to ensure that they don't waste the food, they preserve the food, it's properly dried, among others. Another thing is advocacy. While we appreciate, especially development partners, it is the high time we do advocacy such that the development partners use these many resources that they have to not only give us short-term solutions and keep coming in year and out, but at least invest those resources in long-term solutions that ensure. And I might want to quote, for example, Israel. Israel is like 50% dry, 60% of the land is dry, but they produce enough for their country and export even to Africa. And they have invested a lot in dams and precision agriculture and the like. These are the kind of long-term solutions that we need and not short-term solutions to give people cash transfers and food. So if we advocate for that, then we could be on the right direction. The other thing still within advocacy is also to ensure that we don't always research and do very good papers, very good policies, but not implement. Then lastly on advocacy is to also ensure that we are also advocating for sustainable solutions in production. While we appreciate technological innovations, we also need to ensure that we are not destroying the soil, we are not destroying the environment in terms of chemicals and the like, but we are producing within systems that ensure sustainability within our production systems. Then lastly is also championing for a movement power among the people. And what we mean by this is that while we appreciate the many problems that like corruption, like not being able to implement the policies that we have in place, the people can also hold the government accountable. Like we should not just sit and complain the government is not doing this, it's not doing that, but we should hold our leaders to account and ensure that they are also not just writing policies, but they are actually implementing those policies. While there could be so many solutions to our food sovereignty problems, these are some of the solutions that we suggest, informed by our status report on food sovereignty in Africa. And we believe that taking some of these recommendations could actually be a step further in the right direction. So that said, of course, we have to appreciate the element of research, that there's need for continued research, which now the likes of universities and research institutions can be able to build further on to ensure that we have evidence-informed recommendations. So that is basically our recommendations. And after that, we believe that we'll be able to see the problems, we'll be able to judge it right, and also be able to act in the right way. So what I have presented is not my individual work. It's a co-authored work done by, among others, Father Charles Chilufya, Call, and Dr. Judith Guli. And also with support from different centers across Africa, in Ghana, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Malawi, and Kenya, and Congo. So this is the contributive effort of people who contributed to that particular report. It's a very detailed report, but this is some of the things that we found are affecting food sovereignty in Africa and what we can do. So with Yes, that's right. I'm actually an alumni of Egerton University. I also worked at Laikipia University for some years teaching.
So your colleagues are here from both sides. Huh? So go ahead. I think you got the question.
Yes, I did. And thanks for the question. Yes, what are some clear approaches to addressing food sovereignty in Africa? While there are many solutions, one of the key things is to save what we have. And that is ensuring that we reduce food losses between the farm gate and also the market. And that involves capacity building to producer traders. Number two, solution is to ensure that we take up solutions, because people have water, people have good environments and the like. We need to capacity build our farmers to take up sustainable solutions, especially around practices that do not pollute the water, do not pollute the environment, do not exhaust our soil resources, so that they are at least able to produce enough for themselves, even if they do not sell. And that is what we are calling ecological approach to agriculture. And then lastly is we also need to ensure that we give sustainable solutions to farmers. All these interventions, billions of money being spent on giving food aid and cash transfers, let that money go into heavy investments that are going to ensure that at least, for example, even water is available for irrigation. We don't need to go and farm for the farmers. But if we give them the basic resources like Israel, then we are on the right track to food sovereignty. So that would be my quick 3 responses on the low-hanging fruits that we can invest in.
Thank you. I think we want to give you another heavy clap as you move to another meeting. Thank you very much, Dennis. And please, if you see questions or comments on the chat, you can take time after your meeting to respond to them.
Great, thank you. Thanks a lot, and thanks to everybody. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you. Now, I want to open questions for Dr. Nyuma. I think you got his very interesting area where he was trying to move. It's like moving a motion, that we need to open up the space for SMEs to join the capital markets, but there are certain constraints. And so he's talking about agri-SMEs forming networks so they become stronger to be recognized as strong participants in the capital markets. He gave some solutions and some challenges. Please, any comments? Let's get 3 or 4. So I have one. Please just raise so that the first one up there. Where is the mic? The first lady, then here, then there. Let me see on my right. That. Any burning one? The last one? Okay. So let's go with those 4. And Dr. Nyuma, just pick the questions. Then we'll allow you to come and address them. Go on.
Malim, you mentioned something on microfinance. I've seen there's microfinance called the Kenya Women Loan Lenders. They force farmers to take loans, and even they make them to fake information about the business they own. Again, they make them to join the groups where they maybe could not be the participants, but they're being forced also to take loans as a group. At the end of the day, maybe when one participant fails to pay the loan, the group members are being forced to carry the burden for another person. Is it the right way to go? And again, the case where one farmer fails to pay the loan, the loan lenders, they come and maybe sell the properties of the owner at a cheaper price, making even the farmer, they leave the farmer in a poor state than the way than the way he or she was in. Could there be any possible better way that they can use to recover their loans rather than maybe going and just auctioning the farmer's property and leaving the farmer in the poor state more than the way he or she was before?
You got that? And maybe your mother's household items were taken. So
Not really, I've seen it happening in the village.
I'm just joking. Okay? They actually sometimes take household items. That one I know, so she's very right.
Okay, my question is to Daktari. Do you think maybe by setting a standard prices and maybe lowering of the taxes in our country, can it be a better way of financing the agri-SMEs than maybe encouraging them to take loans from the microfinances and banks? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. My question, it will be either answer, it is true because it touched the youth and finance. I hold it by the time Dr. Kinga was presenting. The question is that we have challenges, youth have challenges of accessing finance. And accessing finance requires some requirements. And you find that if you give grants to youth, they will not channel it to the purpose why it was intended to do so. So they divert it and do their own stuff. If you tell them you want to give them a loan, they will start crying that they cannot raise collaterals to get a loan. So which is the best financial model for these youth so that we can channel them into to start agri-SMEs so that we increase the number vis-a-vis as we get into the capital market? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daktari, for your very stimulating presentation. Actually, you know, this is new to me, and of course, I don't really understand the securities market, but I was just wondering, maybe because I'm in agriculture and I know very many SMEs that have really struggled to build themselves up, get a name, be known. How come, like, this is it the sensitization that they don't know about this? Because since 2016, if this GEMS thing you have talked about has been there, I don't know that there's no daring agri-SME to try that. Thank you.
Okay, I think, Dr. Please can you give Dr. Numa the mic? And because he's a teacher, he can come and I'm pulling his leg. Yeah. When he stands here, he talks better because he's seeing you. And,
the moderator is intimidating, Mwalimu. Okay. Thank you guys for these questions. Oh.
So that I add you another, I've just gotten here.
Okay.
The phone just flew from nowhere and landed on my head.
Okay, I'll take that.
Maybe just add it. Can you help us to know what is the cost an agri-SME would incur to be listed? The listing cost in the stock market, I think. Good. So we give you 2 minutes.
Again, intimidation. Okay. The first question is about MFIs and the problems that borrowers have when it comes to loan collection. I want to say that I am a very biased person when it comes to microfinance. And I would ask you to Google my name. There is a paper in ResearchGate talking about the myths of microfinance, where I have negatively criticized microfinance as a model for, growth, economic growth, SMEs growth, etc. The main problem with microfinance, which leads to those bad loan recovery practices, is the cost of those loans. You talk of Kenya Women Finance Trust. In 2006, when we were writing that paper, Kenya Women Finance Trust was charging 26% interest on their loans. That is huge for an SME. So as to whether this is the best way of collecting loan, where they come, there are cases where they have even taken off the roofs of the borrowers, they collect your households. They are in business. And if you look at what they claim to be doing, why microfinance institutions were created, or why microfinance or group lending model was creating, those microfinance institutions moved away from pursuing those objectives decades ago. They are purely in business, and that's why Kenya Women Finance Trust is just in banking, and they have left their NGO wing to still pretend like they are serving the poorest of the poor. Number two was the issue of taxes, whether tax incentives can be a better way of raising finance than loans from microfinance. Again, still the same issue. I want to say that tax incentives have been offered even by government to SMEs or rather businesses which wants to list. It's not working. It's not working because if you look at the cost of listing, which is our last question, it's too high. And then the requirements that you must satisfy to list, and then the other continuous listing requirements are so stringent that even if you provide tax incentives to businesses to raise finance, it still doesn't work. Look, in this country, the government has provided a tax incentive to businesses which wants to lease that instead of paying 30% corporate taxation, you will pay 25% for the next 5 years, okay? So some tax shelter, next 5 years, post-listing, then you revert to paying 30%. So once you have just listed and you have spent all these millions in transaction advisory services for you to get listed, I think taxation will not help you recover those costs. Why? Because tax is based on profits. And if you are not making profits, then there is no shelter that you are receiving. So, in my view, it's not working. Not only in Kenya, it is not working anywhere. The third issue was access to finance challenges, whether you give grants to the youth, they complain, you give them loans, they say, interests are high, etc., etc. So of these ones, which is a better model? I would say that grants for businesses is not a good thing. Yeah. There's no free lunch on earth. Loans should only be given to people who have the ability to pay. Look at what the government is doing. The only thing that the government is toting around is dangling loans here to women, to youth, to groups, to what? Why are you giving me food that I've not asked for? What I want is to be able to earn an income. But you are giving me a loan to start a business. Who told you that I can run a business? And if everybody is going to run business, who will be buying? I don't know.
Number 4, there have been so many farms which have struggled and they have built their businesses. The market has been here for the last 60 years. The GEMS was created 2013. How come agri-SMEs have not taken advantage and used this platform? Is it because they don't know, or is it because they are not being told? That was one of the constraints. By the way, what is happening is that we are collecting data using SurveyMonkey and online, and some of the data, as they are populating, as they're coming from respondents, this issue of lack of awareness is a major reason why SMEs are not utilizing the GEMS. But let me also say something. We may be aware, just on the passing. When you tell people education is good, and you are not, you are not bringing them to speed why they should go and undertake education, they would think that it is meant for some other people, not them. So, as a business, as a micro, SME, as an SME, when I hear guys talking there about capital markets, to me, it's elitist. I still just associate it with large businesses. So what needs to happen is that the market regulator, together with the market itself, that is the NSC, they need to repackage the public awareness campaign materials targeted for SMEs, so that this information can reach the SMEs with a view to inform them why they need to access capital from the capital markets. Because loans alone never works. How many businesses are being auctioned here because they did take loans which they can't pay? Even some of the largest corporations are going down because of loans. You look at river mining, one of the hugest cement maker in Africa. Look at Mumias Sugar, loans. Look at the supermarket, Nakumat, Tuskys. It is loans and poor governance. SMEs are suffering serious problem of poor management. We need to repackage the information so that we create awareness. Lastly, listing. What is the cost of listing? Okay. In this market, historically, companies are paying about 3% of the total funds that they create. And that 3%, 75% of that 3% goes to one entity, what we call the investment bank. The investment banker, that is the financial institution that works with the firm that wants to seek listing and does for it valuation, help it then in pricing the shares, help it to acquire other transaction advisors so that they are walked through until all the shares are sold. Traditionally, it is the investment bank, which is the main transaction advisor, and the arrangement was that they will be the one which will be underwriting those shares. What I mean here is that you want to sell, let's say, 1 million shares. The transaction advisor is ideally supposed to buy all those shares, then together with you, market the shares to the investment public. If they sell, for example, let's say 70% of those shares, then the remaining 30% will then be owned by the transaction advisor. So that way then, there can be no instance where you wanted to sell 1 million shares, you only sold, let's say, 30% of it, and then you failed to raise the capital you needed. Now,
they charge a tooth and nail when it comes to transaction advisory cost. So this is what has been addressed in GEMS. And one of my recommendations here is that if you look at what is happening now in US, for example, beginning this year, the Securities Exchange Commission of the United States has reviewed its regulations and designed one aspect of the regulation where young companies can go to the market without needing the services of the investment banker. So you see now, if we can adopt that regulation here, that means that SMEs that will be aspiring to raise capital through the capital market will save a lot on the cost of listing. I think that was the last question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I am standing so that I bring an energizer because I look at you and the way you are listening to the question, it looks like we have 99% people who are like SMEs here. We don't know what capital markets is, and we are listening. So I think that's good. Let's give him a last clap. As I invite the new chair of this next session, I want us to, I'm inviting Professor Nguta, who is coming here to chair and replace me. So, kawaida, hakuna kukaa chini kila saa. Let's stand as we welcome him and thank those who presented.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, we want to invite our next speakers for the final session. And our immediate next speaker will be Charles Ngonga. Karibu, please. And you have your 15 minutes. I hope for the interest of time, you will really summarize and give us the highlights of your presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. My name is Charles Numa. I'm going to present on economic efficiency of cricket production, reared under improvised cage system for improved food security and healthy living. So from the picture, those are some of the cricket products. On the left is cricket waffle. On the right is cricket fried rice. We may be aware that agricultural production in sub-Saharan Africa is punctuated by a lot of resource scarcity, depleting land fertility, limited technologies, and low investment in sustainable agriculture. Further, climate variability and extreme also continue to affect the yields, and the lives of many rural households are really much affected. A more sustainable, climate-smart food resource is therefore very important so that we may have an increased nutrition-sensitive food diets that have low environmental impacts in the wake of increasing malnutrition and exponential global population growth. Currently, it is estimated that by 2050, the global population will be around 9.6 billion, and there will be a need to increase food to between 60 to 70%. Also, considering the current production resources, that will be very difficult to achieve unless we diversify our food sources. So a lot of efforts have been made to access sufficient high-quality food for healthy living in line with Sustainable Development Goal number 2 and 3, that is for zero hunger and healthy living. And amongst the efforts, edible insects have attracted a lot of interest, particularly in developing countries. Many communities in Kenya have a long history of consuming insects since the time immemorial. Especially from Western Kenya, where they have a lot of history in consuming insects. Some of the insects that you can see in the pictures. So over time, you realize that consumption of insects have declined due to their seasonality, increasing urbanization, and even loss of biodiversity, amongst others. Of recent, cricket rearing for consumption has been gaining ground in Kenya, and it is visualized to improve food security because of its prominent adaptive, environmental safety, and nutritive benefits. Insects, just like crickets, are resilient to climate changes. They have high conversion efficiency. They are rich in hyper-quality proteins and unsaturated fats, including omega-3 and omega-6, the calcium, iron, zinc, and vitamins. They also have high potential for commercialization and high potential for enhancing household income. The picture you can see are biscuits made from crickets. And next to that picture are packaged biscuit products that the project we are supported in are currently making. And there's high demand for the biscuit products. A packet of those that you are able to see goes for 200 shillings. And that is within the campus. The production cannot, the demand is so high that it's not very easy to sustain with the current production levels. Sustainable, efficient production resources remain a great challenge in the cricket production. So that is the main reason for the focus of this study. So this study proposed an improvised cage system as an alternative to the current systems. So bamboo tree stem was modified as a platter for drinking and feeding instead of the plastic platters, and instead of the scrap blanket was used instead of cotton wool as a substrate for drinking and laying for the crickets. So this was being envisaged to provide a cheaper alternative resource for high production, which is affordable to most of the poor household farmers. The experiment was carried in the insect farm of Jaramogi Oginga Odinga University, and two species of crickets were reared. That is the house cricket and the field cricket, commonly known as Acheta domesticus and Grylas bimaculatus, respectively. They were reared in this particular system, and each partition was stocked with 20-day-old 100 live crickets for either species. The bamboo stems were improvised and used as hideouts for the two species of insects. Water and feed were given ad libitum, and the amount consumed was recorded on a weekly basis. So those diagram represents the two systems. The first one is the bucket system. You can see the cotton wool and the egg trays. And B is the proposed system. So instead of using those particular egg trays, the study is proposing those improvised bamboo stems. And you can see the stems are also modified as platters for substrate and for feed. The cricket weights were equally measured on a weekly basis, and temperature and relative humidity, which are key determinants for production of cricket, were measured. So that shows a clearer picture of the interior view of the improvised cage system. This is just part of the output for this particular research, concentrating on the economic efficiency aspect. So at the end of the production, the stochastic frontier approach was used to determine the efficiency. It normally requires prior specification of the function, and as we may know, the Cobb-Douglas and translog are the major functions that have been commonly used. But according to Ferrara 2020 study, he claims that the function or the model by translog or Cobb-Douglas can be too restrictive and sometimes inappropriate. So this study recommended the generalized additive model, stochastic frontier approach, that was used in estimation of efficiency in this particular study. So that is the model specification, the output being a function of the intercept and the input variables plus the decomposed error terms, taking care of the farm shocks and the inefficiency. The technical efficiency was estimated as the ratio between the output observed to the corresponding frontier output. And the allocative efficiency was also estimated as the total variable cost was estimated as the sum of the prices of the input variables plus the error term. The results showed that labor was highest in terms of the elasticity, or the coefficient of labor was the highest, followed by the feed, and then water and blanket. The high elasticity of labor showed that the contribution of labor to the total productivity was vital, compared to the other inputs in the study. And that is also similar to the findings of the GEVA, who also established that labor was the most limiting factor in tomato production. The kind of labor used in production in this case was hired labor, and it is normally associated with reduced efficiency as reported by Okello et al. And so this study recommended an alternative type of labor, maybe off-farm labor source or family labor, which should be encouraged in cricket production if a similar technology is to be used. Feed at the second highest coefficient, that shows that 1% increase in feed would lead to an increase of 0.36 cricket production, and that is also similar to the previous findings. The next one was water. We know that water is very important in maintaining the physiological state of the insect growth, and that is also similar to the previous findings. Unlike cotton wool, which has been commonly used in cricket production, the scrap blanket was considered more durable. It can be reused, unlike cotton wool, and can also be cost effective, and since it can be recycled. The cost estimate variables, feed had the highest coefficient in terms of price elasticity, followed by labor and then water. We know that insects generally consume little water, unlike the conventional livestock, yet it similarly have comparable nutrients like some of the conventional livestock's sources of proteins which we use. And so it will be cheaper to produce crickets to obtain the nutrients you would similarly obtain in other conventional livestock, but you use very little resources. In terms of the distribution of efficiency scores, the average technical efficiency in this particular cricket production was 85%. That shows that there is still a potential of 15% in increasing the production level using this particular technology. But according to the previous studies, this is an improvement, and therefore would mean that use of improvised cage system increases efficiency level in cricket production compared to the conventional rearing systems. In terms of allocative efficiency, the average allocative efficiency was 92%, suggesting that an average farmer would garner 92% of allocative efficiency in cricket production under this current technology. And this is in line with the general view according to the previous studies that shows that most of the resource-poor farmers are highly efficient in allocating the limited financial resources at their disposal. The economic efficiency scores were ranging from 0.5 to 0.94, which is above the average, with the average of 79%, showing that there is still a potential of around 21% to increase the efficiency of cricket production under this technology. But in terms of comparison, that is higher than the current conventional system. And so in conclusion, the farm-level cricket production was not fully efficient under this technology, but in comparison it is higher than the existing conventional system being used. And so it will be important to assess the key determinants of economic efficiency in cricket production under similar technology to evaluate the specific factors influencing the production. The policies should also emphasize on promoting use of natural resources such as bamboo available for farmers as opposed to the plastic platters, and that would also help. Research should focus more on cross-sectional survey of cricket farmers' economic efficiency to validate the finding of this particular study. Thank you. I wish to acknowledge INSEFood, that is Africa Center of Excellence in Sustainable Use of Insects for Food and Feed, through World Bank support that supported this study. Those are some of the products made from crickets, and you can see how appetizing they look.
Thank you very much. I hope you came with some samples which you can try after this. I don't know. But we can make arrangements.
Yes, we can make arrangements.
All right. Thank you very much. I think we'll hold our questions so that we hear the next speaker, then we can ask them all at once. I think in the interest of time. So could we have the next speaker, Mr. Potio Willie, Dr. Potio Willie. Yes. 15 minutes.
Good afternoon to you. This is Potio Willie from Mathematics Department, School of Science. I'm presenting focusing models for production and yield for maize and potato crops in Kenya. So introduction is the normal ritual about agriculture. We have said that agriculture plays an important role to the economies of countries across the world. And 70% of livelihoods are dependent on it. In Kenya, maize is our main staple crop. Maize accounts for the single largest cultivated land in Kenya because it is the main staple crop and also grown by all poor rural households, according to Nyoro. The importance attached to maize by policymakers in Kenya can be inferred from the emphasis laid on maize in current and post-national policies. Apart from maize, we are talking about potato. Potato is among the 4 crops in Kenya's Big 4 agenda. After maize, potato is the second most crop that is widely used. And statistics shows that 50 billion value is obtained annually. And the industry employs quite a large number of people. Now, mathematical models are valuable tools for analyzing crop farming according to Grabish. The most widely used techniques are what we are calling the Box-Jenkins autogressive moving average, the ARIMA models in brief. But we also have some other models which have been developed based on simulation for analyzing this kind of data. So Senol-Selig 2020 applied ARIMA model on potato production in Turkey. And one of his conclusions was that ARIMA models can be used to model production. Statement of the problem: the deteriorating performance of farming in the form of this development has been one of the key issues affecting strategy makers and individuals with interest in agriculture. So the data will attest to this later on. And the reason is that little consideration has been given to improving the state of farming, either directly or indirectly. This is because policymakers lack vital information for planning and control. We don't provide policymakers with vital models to help them make good decisions. Different approaches have been used to model. We have used, there is regression modeling that has been used by Omoyo to determine the effect of weather and climate variability on maize yields. We have Rogers 2007. He has also come with a spectral index. He has come with an operational spectral agrometeorological yield model for maize. We also have Naslib in Pakistan. And the literature continues. But as you go through the literature, you find that no evidence of an ARIMA model for potato production in Kenya has been used. However, elsewhere, these models are there. Objective of the study: the first objective was to analyze the trends in area harvested, production, and yields of maize and potato crops in Kenya. Then we developed parsimonious models to capture how the evolution of the time series data on those. And also develop forecasting models. Significance of the study: new agricultural research information is needed to supply information to suppliers, policymakers, be it on when the seasons are going to start, the rains are going to start, the quantity that is going to produce. So forecasting now plays a very important role for both prediction and control. Control means that we are comparing the actual and what we forecasted. So we also have to monitor how we are implementing millennium goals. Again, now we have to compare, this is what we wanted and this is where we are. And also we need also to come up with contingency plans. So the information that we get from the model that can be used to achieve all that. The methodology that was used in developing the models, we use what we call the Box-Jenkins methodology. And it has 3 processes. We identify the model, we estimate the model, we check the goodness of it of the model. If the model at the end of the day is not fit, we start the process again, identification. So it is a recursive process. The whole process is recursive. Now, we use secondary data on co-production from 1961 to 2019, which is actually the longest data that has been used in prediction, if any. Especially potato, I said the data is not there. the models are not there. According to WEI, we need a sample size of about 50. So we are not badly off for us, so that we have decisions that are well supported by data. The choice of maize crop was based on its importance both in the local diet and its widespread cultivation in Kenya. But, okay, potato now is the second most consumed food crop. That's why I chose those two. And we used both descriptive statistics because we are looking at the trends of production, yield, area of growth. As software and data used, ARIMA PDQ models were fitted. Findings and discussion. Look at the graphs, findings and discussions. Area harvested, the first graph. You can see how it is increasing steadily. Area under growth of maize has been increasing steadily. Look at the production. Production increased, then we had 2002 elections and 2007 post-election violence. After that, when Kibaki was there as the second time, look at how it shoots up. Then around 2003, around 2013, when we implemented, when we transferred the functions to the county government, you can see again there's an intervention, a big drop. Look at the yield. The area is increasing for maize production, but the yield again is coming down. The yield is coming down. And that is an area of concern. That is for potato production. And among other things, look at the variability. There's high variability. What is causing all this variability? We have the post-election violence after we have the post-election violence. We have also post-election violence, the introduction, the transfer of agricultural function to the county government is also contributing. Around 2013, 2014, there is that clamp down there. Then there's some high feed. So that's what the data is saying. I pray that we can go back to where it was sometimes there. So I've described figure 1. Now look at the maize harvested. Again, the area under production or harvested, the area of maize harvested, you can see it has been increasing steadily. And look at the production, also has been increasing in tandem with area harvested. Look at the yield. The yield is a bit stationary. So I'm wondering whether what is the effect of even these mitigations that we are doing? Is it working or not? Because under maize production, there's no change. So maize is a bit stable. The production is a bit stable. It's a stationary series. So that is as far as descriptive statistics is concerned. Then time series model for the production and yield of maize. So according to this box-Jensen approach, when we are analyzing time series, we have to make the series stationary so that it has a constant trend and the variability is not high. For maize, we had that stationarity. And when we undertook the big fuller tests, so, the main event. So for forecasting, we found AMA 500 to be the best model. That is for maize production. And the coefficients of the model, you can see them. The coefficients are all significant. The coefficients of the model that we developed. The residual analysis shows that the model is okay. So we also focused at maize production, and the identification tools that we use are the ACF, PCF for the stationary series. Again, we came up with a model. You can see the coefficients. Then for potato production, this one was chaotic. even from the graph itself, you could see there was very high non-stationarity in it. To make it stationary, I took log, I different, I logged again. It was a long process. Then I tried another transformation that gave me the results immediately. And so I was able now to come up with a model. And the reason why we don't have these models for potato is the way of analyzing that data. What I went through, to me, indicated that people may shy away from even trying to fit a data. We can compare what I found with what other studies have found. That one is given there. In conclusion, the study showed the trends of two important agricultural crops. The trends revealed interesting characteristics that were associated with certain events, which could be referred to as interventions. This included introduction of agricultural policies in 1981. In 1981, the production was so high. And also, the test also showed that production of maize is stable, unlike the production of maize. Production of potatoes is quite unstable. The study developed models for forecasting maize production and maize yield. The study also developed models for forecasting potato and production yield. And the coefficient of the models were all significant. Recommendation. Agriculture is facing several interventions like climate change, drought, elections, which need to be included in modeling. Research should be done to determine the causes of low yield, and policy recommendations made to ensure food security. Since the yield of crops have gone down, we need to propose new ways of promoting yield, including leaving the land fallow. I remember in the Bible, every 7 years of production, leave it fallow. Every 7 years, instead of intercropping. So we need also to come up with new, simple ways that are not expensive. Since impact of instability after elections of production needs to be investigated. It was very, very clear from my diagram. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's clap for Dr. Potio Willie. We shall engage you further probably in private. Sorry, we have run out of time, but we have our last presenter who we want to give probably 10 minutes, if he could do that. Just give us his highlights, Mr. William Kerr from Baraka College. So that we can be able to fit all the other activities within the time. We don't make people late. Yes, he's not new to us. I understand he was a keynote speaker in our discussion yesterday. Karibu sana.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. So I'm taking over. My name is Kimani Ndongo Cyrus. So I'm going to be presenting on this topic of efficacy of effective microorganisms in agricultural production of crops in Kenya. So these are projects under the Intercongregational Sustainable Agriculture Project, or ICSAP, supported by the Misi and Kara, and implemented by the Franciscan Brothers at Baraka Agricultural College. So basically the introduction is that soil health is a measure of chemical, physical, and biological interactions, and is the single most important factor affecting agricultural production. Effective microorganisms are naturally occurring beneficial organisms that can be utilized to increase microbial diversity of soil, ecosystem, and help in crop improvement. Some of these are lactic acid bacteria, photosynthesizing bacteria, actinomycetes, yeasts, and fermenting fungi. And these are very important in crop production. So the objective of this study is to transform agricultural production systems by utilizing EM, or indigenous microorganisms, as biofertilizer, biopesticide, binocular, to substitute synthetic inputs. So the statement of the problem: the use of chemicals adversely affects the environment, in addition to being expensive. So a more environmentally and pocket-friendly substitute is essential, especially for resource-poor farmers in Kenya. And effective microorganisms EM is a more environmentally friendly and cheaper alternative to chemicals. And it's also a good substitute for or implement for organic farming. So the materials and, for the materials and methods, the study site was Baraka Agricultural College in Molo. The study samples of populations were kales, cabbages, carrots, and sweet potato. The experimental design was a completely randomized block design, 3 replicates, and we had 3 treatments. That is effective microorganisms, DAP, fertilizer, and compost, or conventional methods. So that's a layout of the field layout of the various crops that we use. That's just a photo of one of the experimental field showing some sweet potatoes, some kales. So I'll go over to the results. So as for cabbages, we first looked at the average survival rate of the seedlings which were planted. And we noticed that in plots which had been inoculated with effective microorganisms, the survival rate was higher compared to plots which had been treated with DAP and compost. And DAP had the least seedling survival rate. And then inoculation of plots which had effective microorganisms. In those plots, we observed that there were lower incidences of fungal and bacterial diseases, meaning it was the effective microorganisms were outcompeting the pathogenic microbes, that is fungi and bacteria. And then overall, use of effective microorganisms significantly improves cabbage production through increased seedling survival, enhanced plant vigor, and reduced incidences of diseases. Cabbage yield in terms of weight and diameter of cabbage heads is also significantly improved. So this is just a table showing different parameters: seedling survival, plant vigor, disease plants, weight of heads, diameter of heads, and you can see that DAP and effective microorganisms were producing almost the same results, but in terms of diseases, for those which were inoculated with effective microorganisms, there was 0 disease plants or plants which had any infection. When we move on over to kales, seedling survival was significantly higher also in the effective microbes inoculated plots, followed by compost, and again, DAP had the lowest seedling survival rate. There was no significant difference in plant vigor across the different plots. However, vigor was comparatively high in DAP, followed by IMO, and was lowest on compost. The number of plants which had diseases was significantly lower in plots which were inoculated with the effective microbes. Then the number of marketable leaves per plant was higher in plots which had been inoculated with effective microbes, followed by DAP, and they were significantly lower in compost. So the weight of marketable leaves per plant per harvest was significantly higher in DAP, and the effective microbe inoculated plots, and it was lower in compost treatment. So this is a table also showing the same. As you can notice also, the number of plants which had disease in the effective microbe inoculated plots was 0, or there was no disease in those plots. And in terms of marketable leaves, DAP and the effective microbe inoculated plots had almost the same means or production. Then I move over to carrots. So for carrots, there was no significant rate in germination. That is because the seedlings were planted and then the plots were thinned to ensure that we remained with only 40 seedlings per treatment or per row. So there was no significant difference observed in the number and weight of marketable tubers across the treatment plots. However, the weight of marketable tubers for carrots was comparatively higher in plots which were inoculated with effective microbes, or the effective microbes treatment. There was also no observable significant difference recorded in the number and weight of marketable tubers, and effective microbe plots recorded a comparatively lower number of non-marketable tubers. So in those plots infiltrated with effective microbes, the number of non-marketable tubers were less compared to DAP and compost. So that's a table showing the same in terms of marketable tubers, non-marketable tubers, and you can see that DAP and effective microbes were producing almost the same, even compost, they were producing almost the same in terms of production. So there was not much difference. But the number of non-marketable tubers for EM, they were a bit lower, showing that most of them were marketable in the plots which were treated with the effective microbes. Then for sweet potatoes, we had three different varieties. And they were, again, exposed to those three treatments, DAP, effective microbes, and compost. So there was no significant difference in germination, vigor, and disease incidence, and number of harvested plants across the plots. However, DAP had comparatively lower germination rates, while EM-treated plots showed comparatively high vigor and lower disease incidence. For the first variety, which is 10 spot 1, the number of marketable tubers was not significantly different across the different plots. The weight of marketable tubers was significantly high in plots which had been treated with DAP and effective microbes, and it was lower in plots which had been treated with, or which had compost or conventional planting. For Ken Spot 5, which is the second variety, the weight of marketable tubers was significantly higher in plots which were treated with effective microbes compared to DAP and compost. The number of non-marketable tubers was significantly lower in plots treated with effective microbes across the varieties, and significantly higher in DAP plots, followed by compost in that order. There was no significant difference in weight of non-marketable tubers and foliage weight across varieties and treatments. However, across the varieties, the plots which were treated with effective microbes had a higher foliage weight and lower non-marketable tubers compared to DAP and compost, showing that effective microbes were increasing the weight of foliage in sweet potato and reducing also the most of the tubers were marketable. So you can see from here, this is just foliage weight, and you can see that the lowest was the compost treatment, then the highest was the plots which were treated with effective microbes.
All right, can we wind up now?
Okay. So this is also a box showing the weight of marketable tubers. Again, effective microbes increase the number of the weight of marketable tubers. So I'll skip over the discussion and go to conclusion for the sake of time. So EM had a better effect on the yield of both tuber crops and leafy vegetables than compost. DAP, of course, performed almost the same as the plots which are inoculated with effective microbes. Then EM produced the best yield in terms of increased number and weight of marketable tubers, reduced number of non-marketable tubers, and enhanced foliage weight in sweet potato and carrot. So regarding leafy vegetables, effective microbes enhance the number of leaves, plant vigor and foliage weight in kales and weight and diameter of heads in cabbages. Then these results show that EM can be utilized to transform agricultural production by substituting synthetic fertilizers without any yield loss. The study thus demonstrates the viability of effective microbes as a safer, cheaper, and sustainable crop production method for use by smallholder, resource-poor farmers, and also for people who practice organic farming. So some recommendation is effective microbes can be viably and economically used as biofertilizer to boost production and biopesticide to control pests and diseases in crop production systems as an alternative to synthetic fertilizer and pesticides. And then there is need to do further evaluation of combination of maybe effective microbes and compost to see whether the treatment can improve the yields further without using any chemical interventions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's clap for him. Very good presentation. Thank you very much, Baraka. You came a bit late. Good one. We may not have much time to ask, but I think we'll have one speaker for now, and then we can engage them later, isn't it? Right, so I have one here, which reads, from the findings of the mean DAP propagated, the growth of, just got lost. Do you have another question for somebody else? Oh, yes. Can somebody read the chat for us? The question is there. Juma?
From
the findings, does it mean DAP propagates the growth of weeds? I planted some maize with DAP some 2 years ago, and I struggled with weeds. The following year, I didn't use DAP when planting, and the yield was not as good as the previous year. How do you strike a balance in a town situation where there is no compost?
Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah, I can respond to that. Sorry. Oh, of course, when you use DAP, you favor all plants, DAP all plants, so you'll have your crop growing as well as the weeds. Regarding the use of compost, I think compost, from here we have seen that effective microbes can work better than compost and is comparable to DAP. So compost might be not perform as better as DAP. But again, using DAP also enhances the propagation of those weed crops. But there's no study which has been done to how you can control weeds using maybe biopesticides or biological controls.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a question for Mr. Ngonga, the cricket man? I think it was a very interesting topic. One question, please, for him, and we can engage with them later on.
Okay.
Yes?
I have a question. He said one packet goes for like 200, and there are those other biscuits in the market that are produced at a cheaper price in the same packet or the same unit. So how do they compete, and which market they target for those kind of biscuits?
Right. Give him the mic. Briefly, just tell the audience.
Thank you for the question. The biscuits made from cricket are very nutritious. They have other nutrients. And that is why we are selling the value. We are not selling the quantity. Number two, currently there is still low production of cricket in Kenya and in Africa and in the world at large. And you see, the price of a product is determined by the market factors. I hope we are together. Yes.
Right, thank you very much. Lastly, a question for Dr. Potio Willie on the modeling. Yes, Ms. Benson Obanga, quickly.
Thanks, Dr. Kuti, for your presentation. It was very nice. I wouldn't want to wade too much into mathematics because it's not my forte. But I was interested in the models. I was wondering, does the model apply for the whole
Gonga for the hard questions. I'll attempt to answer them. One, let's look at the nature of the data that we're dealing with. We are dealing with aggregate data for the whole country, obtained from FAO Stat 2019. So we were not dealing with specific counties. I know research has been done for Machakos, Kitui, the yield, whatever. But now I was dealing with the data for the whole country. How has food production been moving for the whole country? And this can be used by the national government specifically. That's why it was like that. Now, model. The model that we're using is just for Kenya, and it can be used for forecasting production in Kenyan case and control in Kenyan case. I've attempted.
Thank you very much. We can engage further, I'm sure, out of this. And thank you very much, everybody. I know there are many more questions. I know there are very many more questions, but in the interest of time, we can engage them later. Let's give the presenters a clap. At least all of them are given us. Right. Let me give Dr. Florence of Wondo to take us to the next section. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Nguta. Kindly let's give him a clap for the good work for moderation this session. So at this juncture, I know that right now we ought to have been in Nakuru, preparing for the swallowship, the evening swallowship, but we are still engaged in serious discussions, which is, of course, interesting. Now, I want to invite our theater group, like Kipe University Theater Group. I know we've had lots of discussion. Yes, Dr. Nyumba, I know you are looking at time. But then you also need to be entertained. Even if it is 5 minutes. Yes, we've been paying attention to serious discussions, serious matters. So now we want to laugh a little bit. So at this point, I welcome the team to come and entertain us. Karibuni sana, the team. Let us encourage them as they walk in. Can we encourage the team as they walk in? Thank you, thank you, thank you.
amesikia usingizi.
Let us encourage her. Let us continue encouraging the girls. I know the duration was limited to prepare for a presentation, but then they will have it right. Relax, eh? That is also part of entertainment, eh? Yes, we are being entertained.
Good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, we are coming to the very tail end of the 3 wonderful days. And I hear there's something which has happened. In drama, I think that is very normal to forget one line. And you know life goes on. To build the confidence of the young thespian, I'll give you some experience. There was the greatest singer in East Africa called Siti Bint Saad. Beautiful name, Siti Bint Saad. And one of the greatest books is actually called Wasifu wa Siti Bint Saad. The first time she appeared on stage, the voice just was not there. And the haters said, Siti tangu lini ukaimba wewe? And she was in tears. But after that, she became the greatest singer in East and Central Africa. I've been requested to give a vote of thanks. And I'll not give a vote of thanks in the traditional way. This was an academic conference. My reflection is very simple. Where do we stand in terms of food systems in comparison to Israel and other food system giants? Because as an applied linguist, I like what I call argumentation. There's also a university in Netherlands, which is also called Holland. I think it's called Wageningen, I don't know. It's a tough name. Why has it stood out? How does it compare to us? Those are thoughts for another day. Secondly, there's somebody yesterday who said professors are not mentoring people. My small advice is very simple. Please make your eyes wide open. When you make your eyes wide open, even in this conference, I've learned a lot. Mentoring Dr. Pondo, we are here because the two of you dug this great well. Sasa tunaweza kuwapigia makofi tafadhali. You may resume your seats. Secondly, is this great university called Laikipia University, whose motto is the seed of wisdom, and which stands in a very scenic place. Any poet can write great poems when he visits Laikipia University. Our forest is simply amazing. Together with Laikipia University, I would want to appreciate the Laikipia University management, led by the Vice Chancellor and the other 5 members of the University Management Board, because their leadership was enabling to make this a great success. Represented here by the Acting Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic Research and Student Affairs, Professor Nguta. When you meet in the management next, please tell them we have said we owe them a debt of gratitude. Tuwapigie makofi tafadhali. All presenters in the room, kindly arise. If you presented anything and you are here, kindly arise. You, ladies and gentlemen of distinct academic honor, we appreciate you. Because in academic conferences, the drivers and the instruments are the presenters. We appreciate you in a very big way. And I request all the active listeners who are seated to kindly clap for our presenters. Thank you very much. You may resume your seats. We have hosted this conference physically and virtually. And the technical team was simply world class. There were no hitches. Everything went seamless. The men and women behind the cameras, the connectivity, they worked like really professionals, and they are still working like really professionals. May I start by recognizing the ones who are seated at the highest point of this hall, because I believe that was where the engine was. May you kindly stand stoically like generals in a good army. Smile broadly as you wave at us. Thank you. Tuwapigie makofi. The lady behind the camera, just wave at us, tafadhali. Tumekuona. There was a man here who never got tired. I don't know where he is. With his glittering beards. And of course, my brother here, who behaved like people where I trained, who say, you talk less and work more. Tumpigie makofi. There's one lady who stood out from the first day up to now. May you please stand up so that we fully recognize you. Tumpigie makofi. Now I'm using the Wittgenstein philosophy. On the first day, we never recognized the organizing committee. This conference had an organizing committee whose chairperson was Dr. Florence Opondo and our able DVC, Professor Vicky Violeta Hassandi. All members of the organizing committee present, kindly stand wherever you are. Some are, I'm sure, in Nakuru, making sure the evening will be a success. I presume this is Mr. Chuma. Mr. Chuma, tafadhali tumpigie makofi. This was the engine behind the success of everything, the coordinator. Once again, I want to appreciate Madam Dr. Florence Opondo. You have the energy of an animal which I'll not describe today, because the way you worked, I wonder if you ever had any sleep, and the way you multitask, and still with a radiant smile. Dr. John Kingang of the Directorate of Research, the senior administrative assistant in that directorate, or the deputy director, I think, the deputy registrar in that department. Tunakushukuru sana. If you are not there, then it means I'm saying good prayers for you for that position. And of course, I was also a member of the organizing committee, and I'm called Mwalim James Ogola Onyango. Asanteni sana, asanteni sana. We are almost ending, so don't, it's almost coming to a close. I want to recognize once again the invaluable input that came from our mother university, Egerton University. For a long time, the Center of Excellence in Agriculture in Eastern Central Africa. For a long time, and I'm sure it still is. Jipigieni makofi Egerton, tafadhali. Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, led by Dr. Nahumicha. Mujipigie makofi tafadhali. Pwani University, led by the applied linguists who brought a lot of divergent thinking in this conference. Tuwapigie Pwani University makofi. And because when I'm giving a vote of thanks, my experience is after I finish, there are people who say, you forgot to mention me. Now from that experience, I'm going to forestall that. And lastly, I want to give a big thanks to anybody who was involved in this conference, spiritually, physically, and in one way or the other. Tuwapigie makofi. It is only fair yes, you know, I was sure about my premonition. When I recognize the sponsors last, it means they are the most important drivers. And of course, Future Africa, which sponsored every coin that was used in this conference, remains a good source of inspiration. Yes, yesterday but one, Dr. Florence Opondo said she has already found the path. Now she wants to pass the baton. Madam Florence, you are going to write to Dr. Mbo, Professor Mbo, the director of Future Africa, and tell him that we are short of words to gratify his efforts. Thank you very much, the sponsors who are Future Africa. And I end by recognizing our DVC Administration Finance and Planning, Professor Isaac Odongo Cheng. We are only recognizing him at this juncture, and after that he will take his position and also implement his role. Asanteni sana, Mungu awabariki sana. Asanteni.
Thank you, Professor Onyango Gola. Let us appreciate him more. Thank you for the kind words and sweet words. So at this juncture, I wish to hand over to Professor Nguta, who will invite our DVC to come over and make his remarks as he closes these events. And later on, I will make a few announcements before we break for tea and thereafter leave for Nakuru. Thank you very much. Professor Nguta, karibu sana.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. I'm sure we have come to an end of our 3 exciting days, and it's been very interesting. We've had very many different ideas. Some have provoked our minds into, and we should make sure we follow up some of those ideas. Let us not have this as the end. All the visitors again who visited our university, we are saying karibu sana, and we hope you have had an enjoyable time. Laikipia is a bit chilly, but this is what makes Laikipia. So I hope you people had a taste of what we live with almost every day. It was very nice to come back and meet colleagues from University of Egerton University, our mother university, colleagues from Pwani University. We've seen people from Baraka University, which is our college, which is our neighbor here, and I'm sure we'd like to carry on collaborating with all these people. What I would say to the panel and the secretariat is that let this not be the last time we are engaging in what we've started. Let us continue. And that means the addresses that we give, the emails and so on, I wish they could be shared with all of us wherever we are, so that if you have anything to discuss with anybody or a question, because we really didn't have enough time to exhaust everything, we can continue this discussion. I hope the Secretariat will be able to do that. Without taking much time, I would go ahead now and invite our DVC Administration and Finance to come and talk on behalf of the VC and probably close the meeting officially. Otherwise, everybody, asanteni sana, and welcome to Laikipia again. Asanteni. Welcome, DVC.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor. And good evening, members. Yes, so my task really is quite straightforward, is to close the conference. For that, of course, is to appreciate all participants, because really, without you, this would not have taken place. So we appreciate that very much, especially the sponsors, without whom, of course, you couldn't have gotten this to this level. I hope that we've all learned from this conference quite a bit. All conferences are learning opportunities, actually. So I hope we've picked up a few things, or many things for that matter. It was the Early Career Research Leader Fellowship Conference or workshop. So you've picked a few things, especially the items that were mentioned on the first day of the conference. Early career. The majority of the participants here belong in a certain demographic. So it's very critical that you pick up whatever you've learned, because going forward, you're going to be researchers, esteemed researchers. So please let us learn, let us also exchange. I believe the professor said that we've got contacts, emails, constantly exchanging ideas on matters of this nature. Actually, the theme was quite apt. It was promoting multidisciplinary research approaches for sustainable agricultural development. In the context of Kenya today and Africa, that's an apt theme to have. Thank you very much, the organizers, and the Dr. Lawrence Opondo, for this wonderful conference. So really, because I stand between you and your break, final break, I won't take too much of your time. On behalf of the Vice Chancellor of the University, Professor Kibet Rotich, who's going to leave for some other activities, and on behalf of the University Management Board, allow me to declare this conference officially closed. Thank you.
Words. So let us appreciate him once again. Let us also appreciate the management. Thank you very much. So before I call upon Rispa to come and close for us with a word of prayer, I want to make a few announcements. First and foremost, I know we've had several presentations, and a number of you have requested for some of the PowerPoint presentations, especially for the keynote speakers. So I will forward those presentations to you, but then for Peter, he sent a paper, and he stated that he wants you people to read the paper, not the PowerPoint presentation. So he sent out a paper. I remember he mentioned it during his presentation that there is an article which he will forward to us, and that is what he forwarded, and he insisted that he wants you to read more about that subject matter. So the other thing I want to put across is that I know the presenters expect to get their certificates at the end of the day, but then the certificates are not yet ready, and we really don't want to rush, for the sake of just handing them over to you, but we want to do a quality certificate that when you hand over to even employers or organizations, they appreciate. So allow us to send those certificates later once they are ready. So after this, I want participants from Egerton University, from JUST, and of course Dr. Nakunicha and Dr. Justus to meet with Edwin briefly. He has something for you, fair, back to your home areas, so please meet with Edwin. The other thing is that we have organized for a dinner at Merica for the participants, for the secretariats, and a few invited guests. So we thought that by 5 we'll be out of this place, but then it's not too late. So kindly after this, let us try and move with speed so that we can converge Merica for the dinner. Hakuna makofi? You guys are not excited about the dinner. Participants, eh? So I think the last announcement is that we would definitely love to get some feedback from the participants, from the audience regarding the arrangements of the workshop or the conference and how everything went on. So allow us to send out monkey surveys for you people to respond. Thereafter we'll be able to know areas that next time, God willing, if we organize for such an event, how we can make it better and improve on a few areas. So thank you very much, and RISPA kindly. RISPA is one of my students, and thank you, by the way, RISPA and Silas and Peter. Please just stand so that you can also be acknowledged. These are my people. I call them my people. So I told them to be standby. When I want something, I just shout and point. I believe you saw me just pointing, and they could run. So they were running around trying to, do a few things. So thank you very much, my people, and continue being my people.
Thank you, Madam. She's my role model and my mentor. My name is Rispan, agribusiness student. Let's bow down and pray. Almighty God, we thank you because of this evening. We thank you for everything that you've done to us, oh God. Since the beginning of the conference, God, you have been faithful until today, and we won't take it for granted. We didn't know that you could make it to this, but God, you have made it a success, and thus, Lord, we just bow down and say thank you, Lord. Even for the participants as they leave, Lord, we pray for journey masses, and even they engage in their projects, Lord, we pray for a success in everything that they do, oh God. And even for my fellow students and God, as we continue in our studies, Lord, we pray that may you continue leading us as you have done it before. And it is in Jesus' name that I pray, believe, and trust you, God.
Thank you very much, Rispa. So kindly feel free to grab a cup of tea or kahawa. So, Professor.